DeRozan Buzz, Conley Harper Mentorship Battle, and the Queta Robinson Center. Boston Celtics fans, buckle up, because this is one of those days where the Celtics rumor mill just will not slow down. We've got a potential future Hall of Famer being floated as Boston's next big addition. We've got a fascinating storyline brewing in the backcourt between a 38-year-old floor general and the guy who might be his successor. And we've got a real debate happening about who should be starting at center for this team when the lights come on in October. If you're a diehard Celtics fan, this is exactly the kind of video you need to watch all the way through, because we are breaking down 3 massive storylines, ranked by how big they actually are. So grab a coffee, get comfortable, and let's dive into everything happening in Boston right now. If this is your first time here, welcome to Celtics Daily Hub, your daily stop for everything green and white. And if you've been here before, you already know what to do. Smash that subscribe button, drop a like, and let me know in the comments which of these 3 storylines has you the most fired up. Let's get into it. DeMar DeRozan to Boston? This is absolutely blowing up Celtics Twitter right now, and for good reason, because this one involves a name that Boston fans were not necessarily expecting to see connected to their favorite team. DeMar DeRozan, a 6-time All-Star, a player who, over a 17-year NBA career, has earned somewhere in the neighborhood of $305 million. And now, after being waived by the Sacramento Kings, he is a free agent on the open market. And Sporting News is floating the idea that the Boston Celtics could be the team that scoops him up to play alongside Jason Tatum. Now let's talk about how DeRozan even got here. He spent this past season with the Kings, but Sacramento made the decision to part ways with him, releasing him with a partial guarantee still left on his deal. That move instantly made him one of the most intriguing names available on the free agent market, and according to reporting, multiple contenders around the league are expected to show interest in the veteran guard forward. So why Boston? Well, think about where the Celtics currently stand. This roster has spacing, it has shooters, and critically, it might need another player who can create his own shot and set the table when the ball isn't in Jason Tatum's hands. The argument being made is that DeRozan gives Boston a secondary shot creator beyond Tatum, Peyton Pritchard, and Derek White, someone who can get to his spots and score in the mid-range in a way almost nobody else on this roster can. There's also the Paul George factor here. George has been one of the more talented two-way wings in this league for years, but injuries have followed him for much of his career, and Boston can't fully bank on him suiting up for all 82 games. If Paul George is healthy and rolling, DeRozan slides into a bench scoring role. But if George is out, DeRozan becomes an even more valuable safety net, a guy who can start, soak up minutes, and keep the offense humming. Here's what makes this so compelling from a big-picture lens. The Celtics are expected to be right there among the top contenders in the Eastern Conference again, and that's exactly the kind of situation that makes Boston an attractive landing spot for a proven vet like DeRozan, who at this stage of his career is chasing something he's never gotten his hands on: a championship. He has put together what many consider a Hall of Fame caliber resume, but the ring has eluded him. Adding a scorer with that kind of pedigree and that kind of career accomplishment would give Boston yet another offensive weapon as they continue chasing another banner. Now, is this a done deal? Absolutely not. This is speculation at this stage, prediction and analysis, not a signed contract. But when you have a franchise like the Celtics, fresh off roster turnover this offseason, connected to a 6-time All-Star looking for his last best shot at a title, that is a storyline worth watching closely over the next few weeks. If Boston's front office, led by Brad Stevens, decides to make a move here, this instantly becomes one of the more fascinating value additions of the summer. And let's not gloss over what this would actually mean stylistically for Boston. This is a franchise that has leaned heavily into three-point volume for years under this era of Celtics basketball. DeRozan is almost the polar opposite of that identity. A mid-range assassin, someone who lives in the paint and the elbow, someone who gets to his spot and simply outskills you one-on-one. In a playoff environment, when the game slows down and defenses lock in on shooters, having a guy who can manufacture a bucket out of nothing without needing a designed action is an incredibly valuable trait. That's exactly the kind of skill set that shows up in a 7-game series when threes stop falling. There's also a locker room angle worth mentioning. DeRozan has a reputation around the league as one of the more well-liked professional veterans in the sport. He's mentored young players everywhere he's been, from Toronto to Chicago to Sacramento. And if Boston is serious about building a culture of continuity after this offseason's changes, adding a respected vet who's been through deep playoff runs before is exactly the kind of locker room presence a lot of contenders covet. Of course, it's worth remembering this is still speculation at this point, an analyst's prediction, not a signed deal. Boston's front office will have plenty of options to weigh, including how a DeRozan addition affects the front court rotation and George's workload. But when you have a franchise like the Celtics, fresh off roster turnover this offseason, connected to a six-time All-Star looking for his last, best shot at a title, that is a storyline worth watching closely over the next few weeks. If Boston's front office, led by Brad Stevens, decides to make a move here, this instantly becomes one of the more fascinating value additions of the summer. What do you think, Celtics fans? Would DeMar DeRozan actually fit next to Jason Tatum? Or does this roster already have enough scoring and needs something else entirely? Drop your take in the comments because I want to see this discussion play out. Conley and Harper, a battle with a bigger meaning. All right, let's shift gears to a story that isn't about a blockbuster acquisition. It's about something a little more human and, honestly, one of the more heartwarming subplots on this Celtics roster heading into next season. We're talking about the relationship and the competition between Mike Conley Jr. and Ron Harper Jr. Here's the backdrop. With Jaylen Brown now gone from Boston, there is simply more opportunity up for grabs in the backcourt this season. Derek White and Peyton Pritchard are going to eat up heavy minutes, no doubt about that. Baylor Shireman and Hugo Gonzalez are also expected to be regular pieces of the rotation, but behind those names, there's a real, genuine battle brewing between the 38-year-old veteran Mike Conley and the 26-year-old Ron Harper Jr. for that remaining playing time. And look, on paper, this is a simple story about two guards competing for minutes. But when you dig into it, there's a much richer narrative here, and it centers on legacy, pressure, and mentorship. Both of these players are literally named after their fathers, and both of their fathers were elite athletes in their own right. Mike Conley's father won Olympic gold in the triple jump back in 1992. Ron Harper's father won 5 NBA championships during his playing days. That is an enormous shadow to play under. Every single time either of these guys steps on an NBA court, there's a piece of their identity tied directly to a legacy that came before them. People see the last name on the jersey and immediately think about the father who wore it, or, in Harper's case, even his own brother, who has emerged as one of the budding stars in this league. That's a lot of built-in pressure before you even dribble the ball. Now here's where the story gets really interesting. The expectation, according to Celtics analysts, is that Conley will likely get the nod early in the season, given his experience, his professionalism, and his track record as one of the most respected floor generals in the league. But as the year rolls on, don't be shocked if Harper starts to carve out more and more of that playing time. And if that shift happens, it's expected to happen specifically because of Conley's mentorship and guidance behind the scenes. That's the beautiful part of this story. Conley isn't just a guy trying to hold off a younger player to protect his own role. By every account, he's a consummate team-first professional who simply wants to be part of a winner, whether he ends up playing all 82 games or closer to 28. And there's a real sense that when Conley eventually calls it a career, hopefully as a Celtic, according to those close to the situation, he'll be handing the torch directly to Harper, the next dependable, low-drama, sure-handed guard capable of making life easier for everybody else on the roster. Think about that for a second. This isn't your typical two guys fighting for a job and it gets ugly storyline. This is a veteran actively investing in the guy who might eventually take his spot, because at this stage, Conley's priority isn't stat padding or ego, it's building a winning culture in that Celtics locker room. And for Ron Harper Jr., having a guide like that, someone who has walked the exact same path of trying to build his own identity outside of a famous family name, is about as valuable a mentorship situation as you could ask for. So while this isn't a blockbuster trade story, this is exactly the kind of subplot that ends up mattering when the games start counting. Chemistry, leadership, depth, these things win playoff series just as much as star power does. Keep an eye on how the Conley-Harper dynamic plays out this season, because if Boston needs guard depth in a tight playoff series, this pairing could end up being far more important than people realize right now. Queta or Robinson, who starts at center? Now let's wrap things up with a question that's going to define how this Celtics team looks on both ends of the floor next season. Who is actually starting at center? Neemias Queta or Mitchell Robinson? This conversation has been heating up coming out of Summer League, and according to insiders covering the team closely, the expectation right now is that Neemias Queta will remain the starter for Boston next season, with Mitchell Robinson expected to come off the bench. Now, why does this matter so much? Because the center position for this Celtics team is genuinely one of the more fascinating roster questions heading into training camp. Robinson, when healthy, is one of the most explosive rim runners and rim protectors in the entire league, a legitimate game-changer defensively when he's right. But availability has been the question mark throughout his career, and there have already been updates on his health and conditioning that are being closely monitored as camp approaches. Queta, on the other hand, has quietly built himself into a reliable, productive piece for Boston. He's mobile, he protects the rim, he finishes above the basket, and most importantly, he's been available and consistent, which matters enormously for a team that already deals with injury questions elsewhere on the roster. The expectation from those plugged into the organization is that his consistency and connection to the rest of the group give him the edge to open the season as the starter, with Robinson working his way into a complementary role off the bench as his conditioning and health allow. But this conversation doesn't stop at just the five-man. It ties into the bigger picture of how this Celtics roster fits together heading into next season. There's also been discussion about Paul George's fit and what a realistic best-case scenario looks like for him this year, along with longer-term conversations about whether Boston could eventually look to move him down the road as the roster continues to evolve. And then there's Peyton Pritchard, whose extension situation remains one of the more important pieces of business the front office needs to sort out this offseason, especially after the kind of impact he's shown he can provide. Add it all up, and you can see why the center battle isn't just about who jumps for the opening tip. It's about depth, health management across an 82-game season, and how head coach Joe Mazzulla wants to build his rotations to be ready for a long playoff push. If Robinson can stay healthy and give Boston legitimate two-way punch off the bench, that's a massive luxury. And if Queta continues developing the way he has, Boston might have found one of the more underrated building blocks on this entire roster. This is a storyline we'll be tracking closely once real training camp basketball begins, because center rotations can shift fast based on matchups, health, and how the head coach wants to close games. Think about how this could play out in a real game situation. Against a smaller, faster lineup, Mazzulla might lean on Queta's mobility and switchability to stay attached to guards on the perimeter. But against a bruising, physical frontcourt, Robinson's length and vertical explosiveness off the bench could be the exact matchup killer Boston needs in a fourth-quarter stretch. That's the luxury of having two legitimate big men who bring different strengths to the table. It gives the coaching staff options rather than forcing them into one rigid game plan every single night. There's also a development angle to track here. Queta has steadily improved every year he's been in the league, and there's a belief around the organization that he still has another gear to reach if given consistent starters minutes. Handing him the keys to open the season isn't just about rewarding availability, it's about continuing to build him into a long-term piece Boston can rely on in the postseason, when rotations tighten and trust matters more than potential. So that's where things stand right now for your Boston Celtics. A potential DeMar DeRozan pursuit that could add a proven six-time All-Star scorer next to Jason Tatum. A genuinely compelling mentorship story brewing between Mike Conley and Ron Harper Jr. in the backcourt. And a center battle between Neemias Queta and Mitchell Robinson that's going to shape how this defense looks from night one. Three very different storylines, but all three point to the same thing. This Celtics roster is stacked with intrigue heading into next season, and there is a lot still left to figure out before opening night. I want to hear from you. Which of these three stories are you most locked in on? Are you hoping Boston goes out and lands DeRozan? Are you rooting for Ron Harper Jr. to carve out a real role behind Conley's mentorship? Or is the center battle the one you're watching closest? Drop it in the comments below. I read every single one of them. If you enjoyed this breakdown, do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe to Celtics Daily Hub if you haven't already, and turn on notifications so you never miss a Celtics update. We're here every single day bringing you the latest on this team, and there is a lot more coming as training camp approaches. Thanks for watching, Celtics fans. I'll see you in the next one.